If you're around my age, you probably remember the days of 8-bit or 16-bit side-scrolling video games. And when I say my age, I mean like a millennial, not like what this guy said where he described me as some sort of nebulous combination of being both 12 and 45. Cool. Anyways, I bring up those side-scrollers because back in the day when we were first playing those games for the first time and discovering what was around each new corner, we were all thinking the same thing. This is the greatest thing of all time. This is the best invention ever. It's never going to get better than this. But obviously it did, because you see where the video game industry is at now, and the things that they're coming up with and introducing to us, we could have never imagined back then. And that's what I want to focus on today, this idea of re-implementing, retooling, and just improving on what you've had before. Because the game we're going to focus on today is Super Boss Monster, a kind of reimagining and new version of the original game Boss Monster by Brotherwise Games. Designers Hayden Dillard and Johnny O'Neill took the core concept of the first game, where you're the villain in a side-scrolling 8-bit video game trying to build a dungeon to defeat as many heroes as possible, and they've tweaked it. They've changed some things up, introduced new mechanics to hopefully upgrade the experience overall. And we're going to be talking about 6 things you need to know if you're considering backing the Kickstarter. So I'm Jake, you're watching Get This Game, and this is Super Boss Monster. Some disclosures right out of the gate. Brotherwise reached out to me to see if I wanted to review the tabletop simulator version of the game, which I happily agreed to. So not only is this a review copy technically, but all of the footage that you're going to be seeing is actually from the tabletop simulator version. So the final look and feel of the game could look slightly different and obviously IRL. Secondly, I have a full overview of the game on my TikTok channel, but if you're unfamiliar with how the world of Boss Monster works, you are going to be adding rooms to your dungeon in the form of cards. These dungeon rooms are going to be able to play off of each other, and they all do a certain amount of damage when heroes enter them. When you are baiting heroes in, you're going to be attracting them with certain types of treasure, and the heroes are going to make their way from left to right across your dungeon, taking damage as they go. If they ever make it to your Boss Monster at the end, you have to take a wound, which are negative points at the end of the game, but if you are able to defeat them before they get there, you have scored a soul, and you need 10 souls to win the whole thing. The first thing you need to know is perhaps the biggest change from the base Boss Monster into Super Boss Monster, and that is going to be the brand new town board that you'll find right smack dab in the middle of the table. This town is going to be all about housing heroes as they kind of get prepared to enter your dungeon. As you display new heroes that you're going to be fighting on any given round, you're going to be adding them to the empty town spaces, and if the town ever gets too full, well, those heroes are going to slide down into some of the other special building markers that are on the bottom row. Now, the importance of those additional buildings is going to become more apparent as we go through some of the other elements of the game, but what you need to know right now is that town fills up pretty darn quick, and you're actually going to be incentivized to start pulling heroes and attracting them to your dungeon, maybe even before you actually are ready to defeat them, because the longer heroes stay in town, the more they're able to train up and prepare and are actually tougher to defeat when they eventually go adventuring on their own. Number 2, I'm simply calling the drafting, because one of the biggest gameplay mechanical changes in Boss Monster is that you are no longer taking random new dungeon cards or spell cards off of the top of the deck. There is going to be an array of options in the market in front of you, and you're all going to be going around with you and your opponents selecting and choosing what dungeon you actually get to add. Now, this is really awesome because it does add a little bit more player agency to the game, and I think that's something that the designers were really hoping for as an improvement to the first game. You actually get a little bit of decision behind planning out and mapping out your moves rather than just hoping to pull something off the top. With that being said, I think in our games, when we played at the full 4-player count, we did run into some issues of turn order. It can be really punishing if you are playing last in a given round and thereby selecting last out of those remaining dungeon options, and more often than not, you're probably going to get something pretty brutal. Yeah, you're going to go first in another round, but it would have been nice to have maybe seen some sort of bigger compensation for people going in the later turns, because boy, some rooms in this game are just straight up better than others. So if you're not even getting the chance to snatch them up first, that hurts just a little bit. Number 3 is going to be the Minion. This is one of the other biggest changes to Super Boss Monster from the original game. You're going to have a single Minion meeple, and there are going to be spots all across the board that you're going to be able to select and choose to put them down to gain some sort of benefit. You could add a new treasure symbol and an additional treasure symbol to your array, making it more likely that you're going to be able to coax a hero into your dungeon from your opponent. You could get additional power in your dungeons. You could even be drawing more dungeon or spell cards. And in some cases, if some of those more powerful heroes do make their way to covering up some of the buildings in town, well, the only way you're actually going to be able to bring them out from town and into your dungeon is by placing your meeple there. This adds the tiniest little element of worker placement, and honestly, I thought this was a great little addition to the overall system. Not only are there some juicy spots in the town itself that you and your opponents are going to be fighting over, you're also going to have the chance to draft some dungeon cards that have their own little space for your minion to go to, that again have some pretty cool benefits you can work off of. Not only that, it is again another element that kind of encourages everyone around the table to kind of lure those heroes into your dungeon, because if the town ever does get too full, again, everyone's going to be sliding down into those different town building slots that actually cover up a bunch of the benefits that the minions can land on. So again, it just encourages everyone to kind of keep that town clear and engage with the game and get more people into the dungeon, because again, you want to have the chance to go back to taking up some of those spaces with your minions. A great little addition. Number 4 is the dungeon crawl, the actual process of having heroes enter your dungeon and moving them through left to right. The cute little coy way they describe this game is that it's a dungeon builder, not an engine builder, right? In that you are building out those different rooms in the dungeon, and the order that you place those rooms in, as well as how they work off of each other, is really the crux of the gameplay itself. And I gotta say, I gotta give credit to this game for not being a standard engine builder that feels like a bit of an automa, a game that just has you going through the motions once you've actually built up what you're trying to create. There are lots of opportunities for interaction and decisions to be made within the dungeon process itself. What I mean by that is sometimes you're gonna be given the decision to potentially destroy a room in your dungeon to get some sort of benefit. And other times you have 1/1 counters that do more damage in your rooms. You're gonna have the chance to maybe switch them up and time things out just right so that you're maximizing the damage you're doing to your heroes. There are a lot of engine builders out there. I'll name games like Furnace. I'll even name games like Wingspan, who once you build up your engine and actually make the decision of what cards are going to go where, there's not a ton else you're going to be worrying about or having to make a decision on, because you're just kind of going through the motions of moving through that engine from left to right. Speaking of heroes, number 5 is going to be the heroes themselves. Now, this game is just dripping with theme in terms of its production, from all of this 16-bit art that you're going to see right down to the different heart tokens you're going to be using being pixelated as well. It's all good stuff, but outside of those heroes kind of being standard Dungeons and Dragons-esque hero types like mages and rogues and clerics, there really isn't a lot else going on with them that kind of injects some theme into their character type beyond what type of treasure they're actually going to. The rogues want money bags, the clerics want Ankh simples, etc. That was a bit of a miss for me, because it would have been really cool to kind of see how additional powers or elements could have been included in what the heroes can kind of do as they're going through the dungeon. Beyond that, it's just kind of a cookie cutter, this is a hero that you're going to be fighting, oh, it just happens to be a mage, so they want the book. It was a bit of a miss for me in an otherwise really gorgeous production that looks to inject a lot of theme in both the cards that you're going to be using, the spells you'll be working with, and of course the super boss monsters themselves. Number 6 is the Meanness. Oh boy. If you've followed me for a little bit, you'll know that I'm kind of up in the air and ambiguous about the level of take that and player interaction that I want in my games. I think just the people that I play with, typically we gravitate towards more kind of less mean, multiplayer solitaire sort of styles. But I gotta say, the spell cards in this game are super punishing and super brutal and super combative, and I loved it. It was kind of refreshing for me to be looking around the room and at any given moment know I could be absolutely screwed by one of my friends who had just the perfect spell at the right time. Now, it would be one thing if there was just kind of a lot of randomness involved, but ultimately those spell cards that are super mean and super take that and could absolutely disrupt your plan, you know they're coming. And so part of the game and part of the fun and part of the strategy is about thinking about how you're going to be mitigating your game plan so that even if you are disrupted by one of your opponents, you're still going to be okay and you're still going to score those hero souls. So overall, the Meanness, you should know that there's a ton of that in the spell cards in this game, as well as a little bit in the places where you're going to be placing your worker placement spots. But otherwise, I really enjoyed the level of Meanness in this game and the amount of take that therein. So finally, the Get This Game scale for Super Boss Monster, starting with gameplay and design, this is going to get an 8 out of 10 for me. Again, I really felt like there was cool elements that were added from the original game into this one. Not necessarily anything too innovative or new, but still some nice little new layers to make this kind of a welcoming game plus category. Really love, again, the idea of the engine builder being more than just going through the motions of seeing how everything plays out. The theme integration did take a hit, especially with, the heroes and even some of the dungeon rooms not having a ton of thematic sense lining up. And overall, though, the ability to actually draft and choose what dungeon cards you could potentially add as opposed to just hoping for the best off the top, a great little addition that is such a small tweak but really impactful in the overall gameplay and design. Presentation gets a 7.5 out of 10 with a big fat asterisk next to it because I have not yet had the physical game in my hands. But speaking to the art, I've already discussed the quality of the 16-bit art style and even how some of the pieces ring true. This game just evokes the theme it is trying to kind of get out of it right from the get-go and in every single card you play. Really, really solid. So we'll keep it even at a 7.5 out of 10 only because I haven't actually held the game in my hands yet. And fun factor, just my overall opinions and thoughts about the game, it's going to get an 8 out of 10 again. Again, I surprisingly really enjoyed the level of Meanness and take that in the spell cards. The game definitely has some cool potential for some awesome combos. For example, in one single round, I was able to defeat 4 heroes in one turn, which is absolutely insane, and it won me the game, and that felt really good. I think the game is going to get a bit of a ding for replayability. The reality is the stack of heroes and the stack of dungeon cards and the stack of spells are ultimately finite. You have a number of different boss monster cards themselves and different boss monsters with some asymmetric powers you'll be able to play around with, but I can definitely foresee playing this game over and over, really getting the idea of what combos are going to work and what spells I need to look out for. So replayability takes a bit of a hit, but honestly, me and my friends, despite playing this exclusively virtually and online, still had a really good time with it. So 8 out of 10. So factoring in gameplay and design being weighted a bit higher, presentation being weighted a bit lower, the overall Get This Game scale for Super Boss Monster is going to be a 7.9 out of 10. Again, not entirely an ingenuitive or super innovative game here. We're all working with kind of the same groups of components that we've seen in other games, but this is still a great addition to that welcoming game plus category. For those people that you've maybe shown a few games to, they're interested in learning more, this is a great game you can break out for them, especially if they're into the whole 8-bit, 16-bit video game side-scroller theme. So I would love to know your thoughts. The game is available on Kickstarter right now, and I'm sure down the line you'll be checking this out once it hits retail. Let me know what you think about my thoughts of the game. If you have any other questions, I'd love to answer them. Thanks again to Brotherwise Games for sending me the digital copy to test out and review. And again, if all of that sounds great to you, you might want to get Super Boss Monster. If you've watched this far, thanks again for checking out my review. If you do like board games and board game content and this kind of lists format of reviews, I do a ton of them on here as well as on my TikTok channel. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm trying to do more of this all the time. Give it a thumbs up, turn on notifications if you can so you can see when my next video comes out. And as always, I'll see you next time.